That's what I would do.
I
All right.
agree with
Well,
that.
the best position in football is not going to rank itself. So
After you, sir.
I'm going with Brock Bowers at one. It's a hot take, I know. Um, what he did at Georgia, I don't think we'll ever see a tight end do again. I mean, just universally the best tight end in college. Going to the Raiders was a tough break. Remember when it looked like it was going to be the Jets or the Raiders on draft day. It was really tough. I know the Rams tried to make a play up for him. That would have been insane. But um, he had a down year last year. He had a great rookie season. He did have one huge game against the Jaguars, but I mean that's a rough knee injury to play through. I firmly expect him to bounce back this year. And he did all of that while dealing with Geno Smith as his quarterback. So it really, especially for a tight end, it can't get much worse than Geno Smith just because he doesn't throw very well over the middle. So very happy to see him gone. Having Kirk Cousins and Fernando Mendoza is quite literally the opposite of Geno Smith. I really don't think it can get more favorable for a guy over the middle than those two guys. So love to see that come together. How about you?
As an avid Broncos fan and a lifelong hater of the Oakland and now Las Vegas Raiders, I have Trey McBride and Brock Bowers tied at 1A and 1B. Since you talked about Bowers, I'll talk a bit about Trey McBride. He's a perfect little angel. He always gets open. He always gets the ball. Especially with Marvin Harrison still figuring it out, and with things unsure if he'll ever figure it out. Trey McBride is currently the number one option in the passing game. He's probably going to continue to be the number one option in the passing game. And obviously, he's probably in for a bit of a down year considering the rebuild going on in Arizona. But certainly, he's only 26, 27 years old, has many good years of top fantasy finishes left in him.
I would agree. I have Trey McBride in my two spot. Not really a whole lot else to add there. I think he's just had a couple of huge years in a row. Ever since winning the Mackey Award in college, I think he's just kind of shown he can be that guy. So I think he'll keep doing it. Said you had Bowers in your two spot.
Yes.
I had Tucker Kraft in my three spot. Not much of a surprise there. A little biased, but I really, in my opinion, the guys between 3 and 6 are all pretty similar. You're kind of picking and choosing what you want. I went with Tucker Kraft. He's coming off the ACL tear. He tore it he tore it in early October. So I feel pretty optimistic that he's not going to miss more than 4 weeks this year. Knowing Green Bay, wouldn't be that surprising if he might take a little longer, but I think for the foreseeable future, he should be a top 3 or 4 fantasy tight end. Jordan Love had a perfect passer rating while targeting him the last 2 years. I think that's going to continue leading the. I think he finished like fourth or fifth in yards after catch for tight ends, despite only playing the first 6 games. Twice last year, I saw a graphic that he had more yards than the Packers were playing through the first 6 weeks. Don't see that much out of a tight end. So had to put Tucker Kraft in my 3 spot.
Great pick for number 3. I got a little bit of an upset pick here at number 3, but I have a little guy out of Bowling Green named Harold Fannin Jr. Um, from the very first week, he was the center point of the Browns offense. They could not get him the ball enough. Obviously, they have a couple new wide receivers this year, and Conception and Boston, but I don't think either of those guys is going. Neither of those guys is a locked and loaded pro ready wide receiver like someone like Cardinal Tate or Jordan Tyson would be. So I still think it's Harold Fannin's passing game, especially with Shadur. Fannon's a great security blanket for him. Obviously, he could do a little better for situations than the Cleveland Road offense, but they showed from the very first week last year how much they trust Fannin, and I think that's going to continue. He had one of the greatest college seasons I've seen from a tight end, and he was doing it in the middle of nowhere, Ohio. So If he can do it in Bowling Green and on Cleveland, he can do it anywhere. And that's why Fannon's at my number 3 spot. So who do you have at number 4?
I went with Tyler Warren, my 4 spot. I was very close to putting Fan in there. Tyler Warren was an absolute monster at tight end. I mean, some of the stat lines you saw out of him there were crazy. And this is going to be a very silly barrier of success for how to evaluate tight ends. But if you're willing to give the tight end the ball in the running game, they're probably going to be a top 5 or 6 tight end. That's just if you're seeing like if you go to your team's box score at the end of the year and you see that the tight end had like 8 carries for like 15 yards and like a touchdown or two, could be they're either the QB sneak guy, could be tight end around. You're going to see Brock Bowers show up a couple of times there. Trey McBride had a rushing touchdown 2 years ago. Tucker Kraft was the Packers QB sneak guy for a while, and Tyler Warren, Wildcat quarterback at Penn State, at a couple of various points. I think he had a couple rushing attempts last year on the Colts. I just think that he's going to see opportunities. The Colts have been desperate to get a tight end in that offense for a couple of years, and they finally got it. With Daniel Jones coming back from injury, should be huge for him. You saw a definite talent discrepancy once he got hurt, but I think we'll once again see Tyler Warren have a huge year.
Great pick for number 4. My number 4 had a guy we just mentioned, Tucker Kraft, like you said, absolutely unbelievable starts last season. Very unfortunate that his season ended early, but I don't think anything's changed in that situation. I think he's still in continue to be the focal point of that offense. And he continues to look like Jordan Love's number 1 weapon, especially since they kind of have a jack of all trades wide receiver room where nobody's really the wide receiver one. It's basically changes every week. So I think it's Tucker Room's passing game to lose, and I don't see him losing it anytime soon. So that's why I've got him at number 4.
A lot of ball knowledge there. I like that pick. My 5 spot, I have Harold Fannin. Can't talk enough about Harold. It's very rare that you get to see a tight end get 9 catches in his first game. And I mean, whenever he's had a quarterback capable of getting the ball down the field to him, we saw a lot of success. Now, that doesn't mean we saw it a lot last year, just with Dylan Gabriel playing, numbers weren't there. But the numbers were there with Joe Flacco, and the numbers were really there with Shedeur towards the end of the year. Caught a deep touchdown against the 49ers, caught a beautiful fade ball right before the absolute disaster of a 2-point conversion play that Cleveland managed to lose that game on. But I think if Shedeur plays, which knowing Cleveland, they are dumb enough to start Deshaun Watson the entire year, which is the gamble here. But I think eventually Harold Fannin will be free from either the Browns or at least hopefully from Deshaun Watson, and they'll find somebody to throw him the ball down the field. And then what is nice, though, is with Concepcion being such a pure slot guy and Denzel Boston being such a pure outside receiver, I think it takes some of the pressure off of him at tight end. Just I don't think he'll get doubled quite as much. So he was my 5 spot guy. How about you?
At 5, again, I've got we just mentioned here, Tyler Warren. Absolutely unbelievable at Penn State and had a phenomenal rookie year on the Colts. Obviously, Daniel Jones going down, and old man Philip Rivers coming in certainly slowed his season down a little bit, but the Colts really don't have anyone at wide receiver I can think of. Obviously, some people are big Josh Downs fans, but I personally don't see what they're talking about. I think Tyler Warren is by far the best option in the pass catching room there, and I think that will continue for the foreseeable future. And like you said, Daniel Jones coming back off an injury, losing a little bit of his mobility, and he's probably going to want to check it down faster rather than scramble for those first downs. Will be a great catalyst for continued Tyler Warren production.
I would agree. They also make a special point to get him the ball in a lot of those short yardage situations, which so much of the tight end position is about getting your opportunities. And that's going to kind of lead into my next pick is a guy that we kind of saw towards the end of last year get a lot more opportunities after just being a non-factor the first 2 months, and that was Colston Loveland. I have him in my 6th spot. in my opinion, he had a huge stretch down towards the end of the year. I think a big chunk of that was DJ Moore's playing phenomenal, especially in the playoffs. I think he was taking a lot of the pressure off of Colston Loveland. The one concern is the Bears run a lot of 2 and 3 tight end sets, so there is some risk there, but they usually don't have Loveland in blocking. I think that he has kind of turned into the Caleb Williams safety blanket. I don't know that that will continue, but I think it has a lot of potential too. So I had him in my sixth spot.
Great pick, great pick. For my number 6 spot, I went with a little rookie out of Oregon by the name of Kenyon Sneak. Obviously, when you're as talented as Kenyon Sneak, you're likely to go into a horrible landing spot. And in this case, he went to probably the worst landing spot in the New York Jets with Geno Smith swinging the ball. But even having said all that, I still think Kenyon Sadiq is an incredible talent. And Geno is obviously not going to be in the Jets forever. He's up there in age. And I think Kenyon Sadiq, we saw what he can do at Oregon. I have no doubt he will do it at the pro level. And that is why he is my number 6 pick.
I really like that pick. We'll definitely be talking about him a little more in my rankings in the next pick or two here. My seventh spot, I went Sam Laporta. In my opinion, I think he was slated to have a big year before injuries kind of derailed it last year, but I didn't think any of them would be significant enough to really damage his long term output. I personally think that we're going to see a couple more big years out of Sam Laporta, especially in that offense. I think he'll probably pick it up. It wasn't that long ago that he was kind of a consensus top 3 or 4 fantasy tight ends. So I think it's pretty safe. Just with the down year, I think he's a guy that you could probably buy a little bit lower, who's kind of in that upper category, gets a lot of volume. Dan Campbell is head coach, former tight end. So always helps his case.
It's a great pick. I also had Sam Laporta as my next pick. I'd have him higher, but my only concerns with him are that he's probably like the number 4 option on the offense after Gibbs, Amon-Ra, James Williams. So there's definitely going to be stretches of the season where he just doesn't put up a lot of points because he's blocking on a screen pass or on a Jahmyr Gibbs touchdown run. But even besides that, very talented. Came in his rookie year, dominated, and will continue to dominate for some time.
I like the analysis there. In the eighth spot, who else could you put in the eighth spot other than number 8 himself? We have Kyle Pitts here. In my opinion, if Kyle Pitts plays till he's like 40, he's going to be a monster because he manages to get one more touchdown every year than he had the year before. Now, Kyle Pitts, very young. The problem is he's still stuck in Atlanta. Now, he is franchise tagged, so this could be an interesting stretch for him. If the Falcons start really cold, he could find himself traded. We could also see a career year out of him because he might get paid big time. Tua had one great season with Jonnu Smith, so there is a shot that they will use Kyle Pitts quite a bit. The Kevin Stefanski scheme usually calls for a lot of heavy 2 tight end sets. And without him being much of a blocker, it wouldn't be that big of a surprise if he's big in the passing game. So David Njoku, I would consider to be a similar kind of tight end. Had a couple of huge years in Cleveland, especially when they could push the ball down the field. So Kyle Pitts probably not getting doubled, probably especially with Bijan on that team and Drake London. He's going to be the third option. But as we've seen in the past, especially in the NFC South, they have trouble with tight ends. Think that he really could have a couple huge games in there. He wrecked me in the fantasy playoffs last year, so can never doubt Kyle Pitts.
I've got Kyle Pitts right here at my number 7 pick. Everything you just said, great talent, freak athlete, on track for a crazy amount of touchdowns in the year 2100. I will probably just win leagues if he started by himself in your lineup. But yeah, I think Tua has shown in the past he can really just hone in on his tight ends. He did it with Johnny Smith. He did it with Darren Waller. He somehow revived the ghost of Darren Waller's career last year for a little bit. And if he can do it with the ghost of Darren Waller, he can definitely do it with Kyle Pitts. But again, the only concern is the Kevin Stefanski offense down there. But Kyle Pitts is very talented. And I don't believe he's been extended yet by them. So He
Yep,
could get out of
contract.
Atlanta shortly.
He might be free. And they already tagged him once, so they probably aren't going to tag him again. All right, in my 9 spot at tight end, we're going to get to Kenyon Sadiq. So he's the second highest high jumper on my top 10 list of tight ends. Had an insane combine, insane career at Oregon. That game against Penn State in the Big Ten Championship 2 years ago was crazy. I think he has all the makings of kind of that all world tight end. He's a big freak athlete. I think he does have some blocking concerns, which might keep him off the field a little bit. Just the Jets are a brutal landing spot between Geno Smith, Mason Taylor, they took in the second round last year, is also a very good tight end. I have no doubt that Sadiq can beat him out, but it might just impact his targets. And all this is happening on the same team that has Brees Hall, Garrett Wilson, and Omar Cooper, who went in round 1. So I think the Jets are setting themselves up to hopefully get an all-world quarterback in the next year or two. I don't even know if it matters, but I think that kind of your best hope if you're drafting Kenyon Sadiq is to hold him for a year or two. Tight ends usually take a little bit longer to develop than other positions, which is part of the reason why we have Fannin, Warren, Loveland to some of these guys higher on our rankings. But I think that Sadiq could really pan out to be one of those guys every week you can count on.
I agree with everything you just said. And for my next pick, I have a guy on the Chicago Bears, Colson Loveland, who we talked about previously. The only reason I don't have him higher is obviously he was a little bit hot and cold for most of the year, and he didn't really have a ton of stretches where he put it together until towards the end of the year. And really, the Ben Johnson Chicago offense, we're still figuring out who's going to be the number one guy. We thought it was going to be Rome. We thought it was going to be Luther Bird. We thought it was going to be Loveland. So I believe in the talent of Colson Loveland. This season, I need to see him more consistently get the ball and get his target share up before I move him higher in my rankings, but certainly a very talented prospect.
I would agree with that. For my 10 spot, I went back and forth here on a couple guys. Some of my honorable mentions at 10, probably George Kittle would have to be one. Isaiah likely would have to be one. The only reason I didn't go Kittle is just that Achilles tear is so devastating, especially at this point in his career. I think that there's a very real shot he doesn't really play much until the very end of the regular season this year. And then after that, kind of who knows. My 10 spot, though, I went with Stowers, the tight end the Eagles just took. I I think that Dallas Goddard's a really good player. I think that he'll continue to hold out in the fort for this year in Philly, but I think that we'll start to see a lot more of him. I thought he was a great talent at Vandy. Obviously, the best high jumper on this list. Him and Sadiq both broke the high jump, long jump records at the combine for tight ends. If you guys take any stock in that, but I really think that he's going to pan out as a player, especially on the Eagles. They just lost their big body target in A.J. Brown a day or two ago. So technically their fade ball target would now be Stowers. So he was my he was my 10th pick at tight end. How about you?
For my last pick, I have a guy you just mentioned, George Kittle. Obviously, the ACL tear is a concern, but it's George Kittle. He's a freak of nature, 1-of-1. And he still has a few years left on his contract, so even if he comes back later in the season, I don't doubt that he will want to play out his contract. He just loves the game of football, loves being a tight end, and is the number one option of the offense when he's healthy.
Very good analysis there. He was my first guy off. Just that injury. It's a killer.
It is.